Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast is entitled UK Media Obsession, Stalking Harassment. Let's bring it out from the UK shadows to the desks of the international legal community. First, an introduction. This week's podcast explores and ponders on the extraordinary behaviour of UK media when it comes to the Sussexes, in particular Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Activity that I, as a non-legal person, considers it to be obsessional, dangerous, and in breach of multiple areas of UK and international law. I consider these continual actions to be carried out for purely self-serving purposes. No regard is paid to the target or targets, and none of the possible outcomes are positive. One would think that following on from the demise of Princess Diana, and how all that treatment that ultimately resulted in tragedy, it would seem that nothing has been learned from those years. The growth and reach of various social media platforms has given those who want to cause harm and deterioration in the mental health of its targets has seen additional weapons used to destroy their prey. I will use the following approach in the structure of this podcast. Highlight a range of dictionary definitions of what I believe the behaviours of UK media working on behalf of the British royal family as part of the invisible contract is deemed to be. I fully accept that my conclusions on the nature of the activity could be wrong, but based on years of evidence of such behaviour, and ultimately perception is real for the individual, both for the target and for anyone witnessing or reading about events in UK press, that others have had legal action taken against them. Important things to note is that the people involved in this abusive behaviour, and who are subsequently dealt with within the law, are not affluent and are not usually Caucasian, not powerful in society, not already involved in upholding the law, not linked with media organisations, and definitely not high-profile members of the UK monarchy family. We will look at, and there will be more details on all of these headings within the article, but for the podcast we will go through a summary of each of these. Descriptions of stalking. Descriptions of harassment. Categories of stalking and the underlying motives. Relationship, if any, to the target. Raise concerns why so many UK media are vested in talking or writing about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex in a hate-inciting manner, most days of the week, as if they are a jilted ex-partner, or a family member who perceives that they have lost control of their prey, by the boundaries now in place to reduce the risk of harm or negative impact on their mental health, or worst case scenario, loss of life. Academic models used to explain how easy it is to move from verbal onslaught to actions without a weapon, and then ultimately the goal is to use the weapon to destroy the target. It only needs one person from the groups that developed from listening to and then joining in on radio and TV telephone-ins to discuss even further into the negativity at stage 1, to move through the ranks to be listed in law enforcement files as a person to keep in the forefront of minds and processes to keep the targets safe. The psychology of stalking. The definition of parasite. What is the UK media's invisible contract with royalty? Why do UK media feel threatened by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex? We need to talk about the UK toxic press. One example of a UK media scout regularly sent out to be the raging bull of the press pack, and who publicly admits that the British royal family have personally thanked him for his conduct relating to regular liaison with Meghan's father, in front of a camera, to continuously trash his daughter for money. A statistical breakdown of one of those UK presenters' activity publicly using Meghan as his target. I have quoted these stats before in a podcast from 2021, which I will link, and these are in addition to that by a separate article written by someone also in 2021. But it's worth repeating here for any newcomers. What happens when you break up with a narcissist? Jane Elliott, the USA former teacher, and the Blue Eyes and Brown Eyes experiment, and how the UK fared compared to other groups. Could this explain this tidal wave of hate and subsequent propaganda surrounding a highly accomplished person of colour entering the UK royal family, which led to a complete and utter breakdown of the aristocracy group in the UK, or at least some members of it, and all those who aspired to be in that group, or who lived their lives through that group as if they were actual members. A hate-baiting approach to media reporting every single day, which has been evident since 2016 and has not abated, even though the Sussexes were forced to leave the UK for their safety and mental health of their family. The abusive tactics and behaviour continues across borders with no signs of slowing down. If a tragedy occurs, I have no doubt that the UK media will do exactly what they did to Princess Diana. Quickly erase records of negative reporting or place them in places hard to find. Switch the game to the coverage of a newly appointed saint. Swamp the nation with the coverage of the loss of such an iconic British person. Make serious amounts of money from a tragedy that they created and were complicit in the conclusion. My final thoughts in the conclusion of this podcast will focus on the following. Where is the law in all of this? The methodologies and scope of the abuse is ahead of what is contained in elements of the Human Rights Act, and therefore some additions need to be added, which reflects the new methods used, in addition to the tools and technology which existed when the law was first introduced. Abusers can be based in one country and still inflict abusive acts on someone based in a different country. Where are the international law specialists? Where are USA law specialists? 3 out of the 4 people in the Sussex family are USA citizens, which includes 2 children with dual citizenship. UK media is daily practicing coercive, controlling, abusive actions like an ex who has not accepted their victims have escaped. Let's now have a look at obsession and descriptions of it. In the article, you will see that some of the words or phrases are highlighted in bold, because all of these words that are in bold or phrases, by the end of this article, basically summarise the abusive nature of what is going on towards the Sussexes. Right, descriptions, obsession. The state of being obsessed with someone or something. The domination of one, thoughts or feelings by a persistent idea, image, desire, etc. The state of being obsessed. A persistent, disturbing preoccupation with a target, person or thing. Medical definition of obsession. Psychiatry. A persistent idea or impulse that continually forces its way into consciousness, often associated with anxiety and mental illness. A persistent preoccupation, idea or feeling, the act of obsessing or the state of being obsessed. One dictionary definition. There are a few in the article, which you will see, and they'll be on some of the slides as well. A pattern of unwanted or intrusive thoughts or urges that recur persistently. A compulsive, often unreasonable idea or emotion. It is a persistent, disturbing preoccupation with an often unreasonable idea or feeling. Stalking. I will be quoting from an organisation called the Susie Lamplugh Trust in relation to stalking. Susie worked at an estate agent's, and much of the job she did was meeting people at void properties with a view to buying or renting that said property. On one of those apparent appointments, Susie went missing from the office. She did not tell anyone that she was going to a viewing, but when the staff realised that Susie was not in the office and looked in her diary, there was an appointment for a viewing that afternoon at a property. But the keys for that property were still in the office. To cut a long story short, this lady was never seen again, and after months of searching for clues and evidence, she was declared officially deceased. This happened in 1986, and to this day her body has never been found, or any details about what may have happened to her. The full story is contained in the links below. I have put 2 links to the tragic tale, but you will find plenty more. A man was subsequently arrested for this crime, and who has always denied involvement. He is due for release from prison this year. Susie Lamplugh's parents set up this charitable trust to deliver training and awareness about the perils of stalking activity, and that it is not to be dismissed lightly as nothing to worry about. The training includes types of employment that leave staff members in a potential vulnerable situation as part of their roles, and the Lamplugh Trust works with employers to be aware of the risks, etc. I quote from the Trust in relation to stalking activity because the behaviour and obsession of UK royal reporters and the tabloid owners who sanction this activity need to be made aware of the dangers of their approach and how they could encourage others to do the same, with even more of a worrying outcome. There are more than enough victims that have been created by those activities within the UK for years, and some of them are no longer with us, as they felt that they could not withstand any more. People feeling hounded and harassed and pursued in the course of their everyday life, and the impact on their mental health, etc. Quote from the Susie Lamplugh Trust. Stalking is a pattern of repeated unwanted behaviour that causes you to feel distressed or scared. It can be perpetrated by men or women. It can happen with or without violence. This means that if you are receiving persistent unwanted contact that is causing you distress, but the person has never threatened you, this is still stalking and it is not acceptable. The Susie Lamplugh Trust defines stalking as a pattern of fixated and obsessive behaviour which is repeated, persistent, intrusive, and causes fear of violence or engenders alarm and distress in the victim. Stalking can consist of any type of behaviour, such as regularly sending flowers or gifts, making unwanted or malicious communication, damaging property, and physical or sexual assault. If the behaviour is persistent and clearly unwanted, causing you fear, distress, or anxiety, then it is stalking, and you should not have to live with it. Stalking often has a huge emotional impact on those it affects. It can lead to feelings of depression, anxiety, and even post-traumatic stress disorder. It can be a psychological as well as a physical crime. Harassment. What is harassment? It is unwanted behaviour which you find offensive or makes you feel intimidated or humiliated. It can happen on its own or alongside other forms of discrimination. Unwanted behaviour can be spoken or written words. Abusive, offensive emails, tweets, or comments on social media platforms. Cyberbullying is a form of harassment, become prevalent with the advent of the internet, smartphones, and social media platforms. Whilst cyberbullying is fairly new, it is still legally regarded in much the same way as other types of harassment. Related legal terms and issues. Burden of proof. The obligation of a party who initiates a legal action, the plaintiff, to prove his or her claims. Cyberbullying. The use of the internet, cell phones, email, instant messaging, chat rooms, or social networks to harass, demean, embarrass, or intimidate someone. Litigation. The process of taking legal action, the process of suing someone or trying them for a criminal act. Miranda rights. Specific rights to which any person taken into police custody is entitled. Police must advise each person arrested of each of these rights before any questioning can be done. Protected class. A group of people with certain characteristics that are protected by law, such as race, religion, and disability. Stalking. The act of pursuing game, prey, or a person by stealth. The act of harassing an individual in an aggressive, threatening, or illegal manner. Definition of parasite. It is an organism that lives in or on an organism of another species, its host, and benefits by deriving nutrients at the other's expense. The parasite attaches itself to the mouth of fishes. It is a person who habitually relies on or exploits others to give nothing in return. A parasite is someone who lives off other people. In another dictionary description, it states, an organism living in, on, or with another organism in order to obtain nutrients, grow, or multiply, often in a state that directly or indirectly harms the host. The host does not benefit from the association and is often harmed. All of these descriptions apply to UK Royal Media personnel as a group. I am aware that there are people who on paper are described as royal reporters, but it is noted that when the Sussexes agreed to announce the details of the birth of their first baby, they only had one royal reporter present, and it was a person of colour who was chosen. That was the first time I had seen this individual, yet he has been part of that group for years. It is abundantly clear who the privileged members of that pack are, and who get the good gigs, so to speak, and who gets the book deals and interviews with members of the royal family. And it has never been with a non-white royal reporter. It has also never been a non-white royal reporter who has hunted down the Sussexes like prey, and in particular Meghan. The Duchess of Sussex responded to the Daily Mail in the famous court case relating to privacy of a private letter from Meghan to her father. Meghan or Harry have not responded to the majority of the obvious onslaught of behaviour since 2016, but it is only a matter of time. Harry does have, Another court case coming up. He's currently battling for the right to pay his own protection using armed personnel due to the increased threats of harm to him and his family, on top of the high risk that was there in the beginning by being born into the royal family, and added to that for serving 10 years in the armed forces, including 2 terms in Afghanistan. UK press bait their prey in the hope that they will respond, and in so doing generate more articles and therefore more income for them. The royal reporters all admit that they do not earn anywhere near the amount of money for coverage of the other royals that they do when they cover the Sussexes, particularly Meghan. It's clear they do not regard her as a human being, and the dislike of her being part of the royal family is clear to see by the media owners as well as the royal reporters and the royal family itself. The evidence is there. There are plenty of receipts that reinforce that view, both in articles and footage. 2 examples which are pertinent to this podcast about stalking and harassment and the income generation it provides for the media involved are these. One royal photographer is on record as saying that in the 4 years that he covered the Sussexes, he earned more than the 30 years before only covering the other members of the royal family. A different photographer is on record as saying that the Sussexes, and I use quotes here, deserve all the abuse that they are getting, end of quote, because they won't allow access to any of the royal reporters now that they have stepped back from senior royal duties and left the UK. And when they were in the UK and working royals, access was not allowed to Meghan. Meghan is the one that they pilloried in their articles, referred to her blood weakening royal blood, described their unborn first child in a host of negative phrases, including referring to the unborn child as frogsborn, and then upon birth showed a photograph of 2 people leaving hospital with a chimpanzee in between the 2 adults holding their hands. Phrases in articles such as a niggling feeling about Meghan being in that family and described her as coming from a ghetto. There are plenty more, and this was daily and remains negative reporting most days. At one point, there were over 100 articles written a day between the tabloids combined, and none of them were positive. Now, those in the Royal Rota are excluded from being the first to receive news, and they are earning way less, and they are even angrier as a result, and have stepped up their hunter and prey activity, even though this family now reside in the USA. Media scouts and abusers. A statistical breakdown of Piers Morgan's obsession with Meghan Markle. Complete article is included in the reference sources below. The article was written by Lakeisha Bailey in May 2021. This is a tiny extract of a very interesting publication. Piers Morgan mentioned Meghan 834 times between November 28th, 2017 and May 21. There is an image that will be on your screen shortly with a variety of quotes from Piers, and it also is in the article. And I said the full article that these quotes come from are included in the reference sources. What happens when you break up with a narcissist? Think here of the British royal family, UK media, and Meghan's father. 4 bullet points. If you are the one that chose to leave, good for you, because that is hard to do. They are likely to give you the fight of your life because they are not done with you. Narcissists hate losing their supply, so they won't let you go easily. They may say, "You will be lost without me." Don't listen to them. It is just a trick to get you to come back to them out of fear. Why UK media feel threatened by the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. We really do need to talk about UK toxic press. Nothing is more threatening to the British press than a black woman in control of her story. Nothing is more threatening to the British press than a prince of the royal family who has stepped back from senior royal duties and is now independently financed and is not taxpayer funded, and who knows all the secrets in the cupboards and walls of the royal family home. A quote from harpersbazaar.com, again full link in the reference sources. The British media obsession with Duchess Meghan is distinguishable from its regular and arguably unhealthy scrutiny of other royals by some marked observations. The preoccupation is often racialised, and if not patently racist, it is gendered in this case, reeking of misogynoir, and it also contains subtle hints of anti-foreign sentiment. Put together, the distinct Meghan is as predictable as it is dangerous, and a reminder that media outlets everywhere save their most antagonistic portrayals for women everywhere, punishing those who attempt ownership and control of their narratives. That Meghan is a black biracial woman exercising command of her story, opposing the account tabloids have sold about her, threatens the mirage of the monarchy as a secure institution, and the media outlets that feed into the machine that they benefit from. What does it say about British media culture, British racism and sexism, that even the most multi-privileged black biracial women are at the receiving end of such ire? And what does it say about those who share the same identity without privilege? The answer is obvious and ugly. Britain, which often imagines itself as occupying a less racist predisposition as its European and North American counterparts, remains a society embedded in racist, sexist, chauvinistic pathologies, ignorant to its reality. Britain has huge swathes of its population that are now unwilling to address these matters in terms of structure, including the media and interpersonally. On your screens there will be a little bit of footage from Jane Elliott and the Blue Eyes and Brown Eyes experiment, and in the article the full video is there. In fact, there are a number of videos on YouTube with Jane Elliott, but I've just chosen a short one for the article and for the podcast. It is a famous experiment, and I have seen a number of videos over the years delivered by Jane to various groups. And I have to say that the one that she did in the UK, in her words, not exact words, but her sentiments about it at the end, was the worst. The one, if any, failed in terms of the outcomes at the end of it. I have seen a few minutes of the UK video. I couldn't watch the whole thing. I was so disgusted by it and, disappointed as well. Again, you will find all that on YouTube. It's well worth viewing. It's uncomfortable viewing in all of the videos. The UK one is the worst, but the others just not uncomfortable because of the responses themselves. It was the fact that people thought that way. People had views that you would have thought would have disappeared by now. So yeah, Jane Elliott, highly recommend. You will have a range of opinions, no doubt, at the end of it, but I recommend that you watch a few, not just one. She started off, her first one was experiments in a classroom with children, obviously, as she was a teacher. But she's gone on to do a range of teaching, training. She's retired now, but you will see. It's definitely food for thought. It certainly generates discussion even now. I recommend. So that's included, I said, in the podcast, and the full video, or at least the shortest one, but in full, is in the article. And so we're on to the conclusion section now. Where is the law in all of this? The methodologies and scope of the abuse is ahead of what is contained in elements of the Human Rights Act, as I've said before, and therefore some additions need to be added, which reflect these new methods, in addition to the tools and technology which existed when the law was first introduced. Abusers can be based in one country and still inflict abusive acts on someone based in a different country. Where are the international law specialists? Where are USA law specialists? UK media is daily practicing coercive, controlling, abusive actions like an ex who has not accepted their victims have escaped. The Sussexes are being treated like prey by an abusive partner and friends because their victims managed to escape. The abusive actions continue even now that they reside in California. California, that passed the Coercive Control Bill on the 29th of September in 2020, has a family who is resident there, being treated this way by people based in another country. One of their main abusers from that UK media pack is also a resident in the state for part of the year. The risks may be different, but still high, and it is time now that legal minds come together and protect those on the receiving end of such activity. No matter the amount of lack of resources, everyone is entitled to protection under the law, and I see no reason why abusive actions and systems within a monarchy structure should escape the law. Slavery has been abolished, apparently. So, if someone were to set up a plantation now and have slaves carry out duties and be tied to that plantation or land, whether or not they wish to be there, action would be taken. Cults receive scrutiny under the law. Why is it different if the abuse is carried out behind gilded gates? Why is Child Protection Services not involved in the way children are brought into the world in that regime and told that they cannot leave, and their function is to be the foot soldiers for the monarchy? Why then adults exercise their right to work for a living and live where they choose? Are they treated like traitors or slaves who have escaped the plantation? USA, step up please for those with and without financial resources to challenge such behaviours. I am already hearing about a wish in certain states of the USA for a domestic supply of babies for adoption. This is very disturbing and is potentially the start of a very worrying trend in those states. Turning the clock back comes to mind. California governor and senator who supported this bill in your state show the rest of the nation how to begin to tackle some of these abusive practices, let alone in this case it is being done by a nation that is increasingly isolationist and an increasingly worrying place to live. The fact that a family dared to leave and are still being treated this way by powerful forces require powerful forces in the USA to respond to protect their citizens. These images are just a sample of the media pack that daily inflict hate inciting rhetoric in their articles or in their TV programmes aimed at certain groups. The images are on your screen, or some of them, and there are quite a few in the article. As the hate models I have shown many times, and will include again in this podcast, a couple of them anyway, and in the article, what starts off as verbal activity can and does progress to an increasing scale of danger and eventually ends with the use of weapons to take out the target. The FBI uses these models and more to track groups globally. Academics have produced multitudes of research with evidence that these risks exist around the world and are on the increase, with such new additions to the delivery, such as online social media platforms, to target individuals for the bombardment of hatred, and also to increase more people coming forward to be part of that hate group. Time to act now. Please. That's the end of this week's podcast. I look forward, as always, to the comments and I will respond accordingly. And I will be with you again next week. So it's bye for now. Bye from Ivy. Bye.